Why is communication so important? Well, it's the difference between getting the things that you want or need and not. There's two different ways to communicate, right? There's communicating with yourself and there's communicating with others. You could argue that communicating with yourself is harder than communicating with others because it's so easy to freely open your mouth and speak to others without much thought. But when you speak to yourself, you have to really focus. Sometimes it needs to be quiet. And you need to speak to yourself in a very direct manner on what it is exactly that you want, need, or are trying to work through. Yesterday, something happened that I didn't want it to happen. Now, this was the product of bad communication, particularly with somebody that I value very much. Now, communication is often said to be a two-way street. But not clearly articulating your viewpoints in one direction can sometimes be the detriment of the entire link. What do I mean by that? Well, yesterday I said I had a bad day, or maybe I didn't, but I had a bad situation that occurred. It was caused from poor communication. Well, there was also a blast radius of others that were impacted by my lack of communication and these other people's lack of communication. And it wasn't until I stepped back from the situation, lack of communication with others, and I communicated with myself, that I then realized where things went wrong. Everybody works on communication with others and yourself, but I think flipping the two can really work well together. If you're having issues with others, speak to yourself. Reflect on what you have communicated, what the other people have communicated, and analyze where there might be gaps. And vice versa. If you're having internal conflicts and you're trying to deal with how do I become better? How do I eat less? How do I do more? Those are internal battles that you're communicating with yourself, and you might be having trouble effectively communicating. That's where I would implore you to go communicate with others about those internal conflicts, whether that's directly or indirectly through social outlets. But I believe there's two paths: communicating with others and communicating with yourself. And from yesterday, my conflict was with others. So I spent the day, I stepped away, to not get angry, not get mad at the situation, and I spoke to myself. Now, I've talked about this before, but one of my golden rules is to not make harsh decisions from a position of weakness. When I'm not 100% in this specific category, I didn't have full mental clarity in this moment of chaos, of a lack of communication, when things got hectic. That was not the time to make a rash decision. I always try and step away. That's what works for me. Remove myself from a situation. Everybody has different things that help them. Maybe for some, you can't have those tough conversations right then and there. But for me, I like to go talk to myself. When you have a situation that you're working through, communication, is the difference between solving that problem and not. So breaking down the steps of what went wrong and how you would like to fix that is how you're going to get past that. When I work with myself, I like to let it all out. I like to be very direct and say, hey, this is where my feelings got hurt. This is where something went wrong. And I work back from there and I say, okay, now that I've solved where I think this went wrong, how do I fix this from here? Because like I said, in my situation, there was others impacted. Others that probably didn't even know they were impacted because the lack of communication was from point A, me, to point B, somebody else. But there was a C, a D, an E. So working through with myself how I'm going to address those other points of contact in a manner that both heals things for me but also doesn't bring them into my issues is important. Because you don't need to bring everybody into every lack of communication you have with somebody. No. Sometimes you just need to take a step back, analyze the situation, and say, okay, how can I fix this issue between somebody without making it a problem, without making it dramatic? Sometimes you just need to let them know, hey, there was a miscommunication between me and somebody else. And I just want you to know, in the future, you and I should communicate more as well, not just with that person. And if you're dealing with an internal conflict, I like to go to a private resource first. So AI, an online tool. I try and work through an indirect online source where I can get information, but sometimes it's going to be biased. You're going to look for things that are favoring your thoughts. So if you feel comfortable just talking to somebody about your conflicts internal, that might be a very good way to get good insight on whether your problem is deep internal or it's something that you can change in your life and get a different outcome. But I never try and make a big, dramatic decision based on my mistakes from a place of weakness.